Hi everyone, in this video we will be going over Module 8, Case Problem 3, LKE distribution from New Perspectives, Microsoft Office 365, and Excel 2016. So in this assignment, steps 1 and 2 have us go ahead and put in our name and a date and save the file in a location of our choice. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that you've already done that and move on to number 3. So number 3 asks us to move over to this invoices sheet and go into cell B1 and put in a specific date, which is July 1st, 2017. Another thing that we should also note here is that there is a defined name, current date, has been given to the cell already. So that's just something to keep in mind as we work through this. So number 4 of this problem is telling us about a problem that exists here in this cell, here in column E. Basically, whoever put this together, they used VLOOKUP to look up the commission rates for each of these sales representatives, and then multiplied the commission rate by the invoice amount, but we can see that something's wrong here, so we need to fix that. So let's go ahead and just kind of look at each of these cells, and we can see that we're using a standard VLOOKUP. The lookup value here is the sales rep's name. The table that we are referencing is this range of A4 to B7 on the commissions worksheet. So that's this here. And then we're multiplying that by F3, which is the invoice amount. So of course, this looks like it should work, and it is working in this first cell, but we see that later on in rows, after row 3, that it has an issue. So let's compare row 3 to row 4. And so if we look between rows 3 and 4, we can see that the values that are being used for the second argument of our VLOOKUP, which refers to the table that we're looking up that data from, that is changing every time. So we can see here that originally we're looking this up in the range of A4 to B7 on the commissions worksheet. And so if we go over, check A4 to B7 is exactly what we want to be querying here. But if we look in this next row, we are now querying from A7 to B10. And so if we look at the commission sheet and look at A7 to B10, we can see that that range has changed. And so that is a very clear indicator that we have a problem. And so this is an easy problem to fix, though, of course, is because as the cell is getting copied or auto-filled down to the rest of the table, that is what's causing our calculations to be incorrect, because the table that we're looking up this data from, of course, the location of that reference is changing. So if we go ahead and change this to a static reference and then autofill the rest of the table, we can go ahead and see correct calculations of each individual's cell commission from each of these invoice amounts. So that takes care of number 4, and we can move on to number 5. So number 5 has us working in column G. We are supposed to, according to the assignment, enter a formula that uses the if function to calculate some values. So the values that we're calculating here is the number of days since the invoice was sent. And so we want to basically, if our invoice is past due, we're going to define past due as it's more than 30 days past the issue date that invoice is past due, and we want to calculate the number of days that it's past due. But if it's been less than 30 days before our invoice, or since our invoice has been issued, then we're just going to say that it's not yet considered past due, and we're only going to say that because it's not yet past due, it's going to be 0 days past due. So let's go ahead and, of course, we're going to have to use an if statement to do this. So first thing that we want to do is check and see if something is or is not past due. So, of course, our logical test is going to be current date minus the invoice date. And so if that is greater than 30 days, then we need to show how many days past due this is. So something that is on its 31st day is going to be 1 day past due. So to calculate that correctly, we are going to have to do current date minus our invoice date minus 30. Otherwise, we will display 0. And so as we can see here, we have these various invoices. Some are not yet past due, and some are varying levels of past due. So it looks like that everything was done correctly. Of course, something that was issued May 28th should be about 4 days past due. Something issued June 6th on July 1st is still not yet past due. And so it looks like from a quick spot check that we are doing this correctly. So we get to move on to number 6. So number 6 has us working with many of these columns here. So we are going to be working in columns H, I, J, K, and L. And so what we want to do in these columns is display the invoice amount if the invoice is current. Let's phrase that a little bit better. So for each row, we want to display a numerical value, so a dollar value, in one of these 5 cells. And so if the bill or invoice is current, we're going to put the amount of the invoice here in the current row. If it's 1 to 30 days overdue, it's going to end up here in column I. If it's 31 to 60 days overdue, we're going to put it here in column J, and so on and so forth. And so to do this, we are going to use a series of if statements. And so we'll go ahead and just do this column by column. And so our first if statement is going to be if the invoice is current. So if it is not past due, so if days past due equals 0, then we want to put the invoice amount. Otherwise, we're just going to leave the cell blank. And so now we can see here in column H that in the for the invoices, such as these ones here in rows 4 and 5, when the days past due is 0, then we display that amount in the current column, and nothing is displayed in any of the other columns. And so now we're going to do the same thing, but with a little bit more complicated conditions. So now we have to check to see if something is in the range of between 1 or 30 days past due. So we're going to use a formula that uses the AND function to check to make sure 2 conditions are true. So if both it being past due is greater than or equal to 1, and the days past due is less than or equal to 31, then we are going to display the invoice amount in this column. Otherwise, we'll leave the cell blank. And so now we can see that invoice amounts that are between 1 and 30 days past due are now being displayed in column I. And for each row that has data displayed in column I, nothing else is being displayed in columns H through L. And so we can use a similar formula for each one of these 31 to 60 days, 61 to 90 days, and over 90 days. So for the 31 and 61 day columns, I'm going to go ahead and just copy this formula. We're going to just paste in the text of the formula and change these values. So if it's greater than 31 days and less than or equal to 60 days, we're going to go ahead and put that in there, and we can see that here's 45 and 44 days. Both of those are showing up in here. And then again, nothing else is being displayed in those other columns. One thing, though, I did notice is we made a mistake here in column I, that we were looking for less than or equal to 31 days instead of less than or equal to 30 days. So make sure that those are all matching up. Going back to 61 to 90 days, again, we're just going to copy and paste that old formula in and convert that to be greater than or equal to 61 days and less than or equal to 90 days. So in that case, where something is that overdue, we are going to display that amount there. So we can see this one 78 days overdue, 88 days overdue, and so that looks to be displaying correctly. And then again, for each of these rows, nothing else is being displayed. And then finally, for over 90 days, we're going to use an if statement much more similar to the one that we used for the current. So if days past due is greater than 90, then we will display the invoice amount. Otherwise, we will display nothing. And so we can see here, this invoice is 114 days past due. So that its value is showing up in the over 90 days column. So that takes us through number 6 in this step, or in this exercise. So we can now move on to number 7. So in number 7, what we're going to do is we're going to be creating a summary of overdue accounts. And so there's a number of things that we need to do to complete this step successfully. So the first thing that we're going to do is first make a copy of this invoices worksheet. And we're going to put it right after our invoices worksheet and before our invoices report worksheet. And then once that copy has been made, we're going to call that overdue accounts. And so now in the overdue accounts worksheet, there is a few things we need to do. So the first thing is, because this is a worksheet for overdue accounts, we only care about overdue accounts. So we're going to go ahead and filter our records so that only invoices whose balance is past due is displayed. So one easy way to do that is we can go ahead and just filter on the filter on days past due, and we only want to show numbers that are greater than 0, because if days past due is not is less than 1, then the invoice is not considered to be overdue. So we go ahead and apply that filter, and now we can see that we are only viewing invoices that are overdue by 1 or more days. Now we need to sort this data. So we are going to sort this data by the invoice date, with the oldest invoice first. And so this is a great time to check and make sure that you've entered all of your formulas correctly in our previous steps, because your worksheet should have this nice little cascade here of 90 days, then 61 to 90, 30 to 31 to 60, and then 1 to 30. And so if your spreadsheet looks similar to this, you are definitely on the right track. So we want to now create totals for this spreadsheet so that we can have the totals of each type of overdue amount. So we're going to go ahead and do this through the Excel table tools, since this is an Excel table. We're going to go ahead and click anywhere in the table, go to Table Design, and then we are going to enable the total row by clicking on this button for total row. And at the bottom of our table now, we have this row that contains the ability to total up values. So let's go ahead and make sure that we are creating a sum for each columns I through L. So I, J, K, and L. So of course, to do that, we just need to select sum as the total type for each of these columns. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete the label here that says total. And then after that, we will hide columns D, E, F, G, and H. And then finally, to complete number 7, we just need to remove filter buttons and grid lines from our table. So to do that, we are going to go back to our table design options, and we are going to select the option filter buttons to disable the filter buttons. And then to disable the grid lines, we're going to go to the view tab. And then in the view tab of our ribbon, in the show section, we are going to click on grid lines, which will disable grid lines and only leave the table styling. So beautiful table that we have here. Now, we have to move on to number 8, where we need to troubleshoot another problem. So we can see here that someone has tried to use the COUNTIF function to determine how many invoices belong to each sales representative. However, these formulas are only displaying zeros, and so we need to fix this range so that the number of invoices being generated by or being handled by each representative is correctly displayed. So let's go ahead and let's see. So COUNTIF is looking for data in the range of D4 to D105 that contains the name Boehmer. Of course, D4 to D105 in this worksheet doesn't have any data. And in fact, we're probably going to be needing to pull this data from the invoices worksheet. So let's go see what column D in the invoices worksheet has. And if we look here, oh, wow, column D contains the sales reps' names. And so maybe on this invoice reports worksheet, they were intending to reference columns D4 to D105 in the invoices worksheet. So let's go ahead and just put that in there. We can just put in the name of the worksheet followed by an exclamation point, hit enter, and then we can see that that fixed our problem. So we can see that Boehmer here is listed as having 38 invoices. So let's go ahead and autofill that formula to everybody else. Boehmer, Johnson, Leisure, and Riley have a total of 100 invoices. So let's double check to make sure that that's right. And so what we can do is we should be counting all of the invoices. So if we just go ahead and highlight all of these rows or all of these cells here, we can then go look at our quick tools here and see that the total number of cells that we selected was actually 102 cells. So our count is off by 2. But if we look real quick, I think it's pretty clear. So we are selecting data from the range of D4 to D105. But this spreadsheet is really D3 to D104. So let's go ahead and fix that. So we're going to go ahead and have, instead of going for D4 to D105, let's go ahead and do D3 to D105. Autofill that. And that gives us one more invoice, but it still looks like we're missing an invoice. And of course, the reason why becomes clear when we start to go through each row here is that by not using absolute references on at least the row number, the row being referenced is changing in each iteration of this autofill. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. So we're always going to be looking D3 to D105. And then autofill there. And all of a sudden, we now have a total of 102 total invoices being handled by our 4 sales reps. So now we've already done that check. We know that there's a total of 102 invoices on the invoices worksheet. And so we are now pretty confident in the correctness of our formula that we're counting everything accurately. So now all that was really left is for us to finish the rest of this worksheet. So what we need to do here is in column C, we are going to calculate the total commission earned by each invoice or each representative, and then the total amount of invoices that they hold. And so once we do that, then we will need to figure out this table over here. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and just finish this table that we're working on here. So to calculate the total amount of commissions from each representative, we are going to have to use the SUMIF function. So the SUMIF function works very similar to our sum function and in some ways like our if function. So just like our sum function, we are going to give this formula, the first argument is going to be the range that we want it to generate a sum from. Or sorry, that is incorrect. I will edit this out. So to use the SUMIF function, we are going to first use the range in which we were going to be using as a criteria. So going over to invoice is worksheet here, we are only going to want to add together certain rows where the sales rep is the sales rep that we're creating the total for. So we know that the range that we're going to be checking against is going to be the sales rep's name. So let's go ahead and put in that D4 or D3 to D104. since that's the range that contains all of these names. And then once we have that in, we're going to go back to our invoices report sheet, and the criteria is going to be the name Bomer. So we can just click on the cell that contains that name instead of typing in it ourselves. And then finally, we have this optional argument here called sum range. And so by default, SUMIF is going to sum up all the values in the range that match the criteria. But obviously here, that's not going to achieve what we are hoping to in terms of summing up the commissions, because creating a sum from the columns that contains names is just going to give us a nonsensical result. And so in those cases where the column that contains the number that we want to sum up is different than the column that contains the range that we're checking against for our criteria, we can use the sum range argument. So with the sum range argument, we're going to go ahead and just put in the range that corresponds to this very similar range to invoices that we've put in as our range that we're checking against for the criteria. We're just going to now want to put in the range to sum up. So that in this case is going to be the sales commission. So that's going to be column E. And that'll be E3 through E104, since the table, we know the dimensions of the table. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter. And so now we can see that 4,590 is hypothetically the total amount of commissions earned by Bomer. And so let's go ahead, and there's a couple things that we need to do. Let's go ahead and make these ranges static so that when we autofill, we don't have to worry about the same problem that we did here in the invoices column. So let's go ahead now, and we're going to autofill this for all of our representatives here. And so we can see that that comes out to a total sum of $8,486. And so as a quick sanity check, we're going to take a look at that. So roughly $8,400. We're going to sum up all of our sales commissions real quick. And that comes out to $8,486.74. So that matches what we were hoping to see. We will fix formatting here in just a second. But let's get all of our calculations in first, and then we'll worry about sums and formatting. So next, now we need to calculate total invoice amounts by representative. So very similar to the function that we've used. So I'm going to just go ahead and copy that function. But since when we're calculating commissions, commissions are in column E, but invoice amounts are in F. So if we want to calculate total amount of invoices per representative instead of total commissions, then we're just going to, instead of summing up values in column E, we're going to sum up values in column F instead. So we can just go ahead and use that same formula, change the E to an F, and press enter, and we should be good to go. So we'll autofill those. Look at that sum, comes up to be $139,472. And so we'll do that same kind of sanity check that we have in the past, and this comes up to $139,472. And so that is what we're looking for in both cases. And so we know that we are summing these up correctly. So now, now that we've finished filling in the data for this table, we can complete these total rows. So let's go ahead and just sum up the total amount of commissions and total amount of sales. And then we're going to go ahead and select all of these and apply the accounting format to them. And so these are all getting formatted as dollars now. Of course, if you wanted to, you could kind of make this look a little bit prettier by applying the comma style to these intermediary rows. But that's up to you. I think personally this is looks a little bit nicer. So now we have a very similar task that we need to do, but instead of counting the number of invoices that are owned by a certain representative, we're going to count the total number of invoices that are existing based on their outstanding date, or whether or not they're current even. So in this case, we'd care about both current invoices as well as outstanding ones. But what we're going to be doing here is very similar to what we've done already. So really we just want to count the number of invoices that are current, that are overdue by 1 to 30 days, 31 to 60 days, 61 to 90 days, and so on. And so since we've already gone through the work here on the worksheet here to create totals for current and then different levels of overdue invoices, we can actually just leverage this work that we've done already to fill in this next section here. So the count function, just the plain count function, will only count cells that have a number in them. So if we go ahead and use count over the range of current invoices, so that's going to be H3 through H, looks like 104, or just the current header in this spreadsheet. Since that only counts cells that have a numerical value in them, that quickly counts the number of current invoices, which is 54. And then we can use this same formula, but instead of using the column header current, we can use the column header 1 to 30 days to get that same count for 1 to 30 days. Then we'll change current in this case after pasting it again to 31 to 60 days. Of course, we need to make sure we have the word days in there. And then again for this next column header, 61 to 90 days. And then finally for over 90 days, in which case we're just going to use this exact same thing that we have, except we're going to use the header over 90 days. And then we'll go ahead and quickly use the sum function here to create a total that is 102. And since we already know that 102 is the total number of invoices, we can see that we have calculated all of these correctly. Now, we just have to do the exact same thing here with the total amount column. Again, same trick is since we already know, we've already split out all of the current versus 130 day, or sorry, 1 to 30 day, 31 to 60 day, etc. values. We just need to sum up each column individually. So let's go ahead and sum our total amount here. So it's going to be the same thing as we can just use this table syntax. So it's going to be the aging table with and then the row, or sorry, the column that has the header current. And so we can just use that syntax here that we're already familiar with. Aging, and then 1 to 30 days. Of course, again, you see I forgot to put in days, so make sure that you're using the full name of each of these column headers. I'm going to put in 61 to 90 days, and then last one here is again going to be over 90 days. So we're going to put in over 90 days. And then we now have values for each one of these table or each one of these categories. We'll create a sum of these, and then that sum comes out to $139,472.30, which is that same amount, which is also the same amount of all the invoices here that we'll check. So we can see that same value comes up right here. And so we now have completed everything that we need to for this assignment. So I hope that this helps and that you feel a little bit more comfortable working through Module 8 of our textbook. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a